find ourselves back in the incomprehensible maze. Episode 12, Studio Life. How did we make it 12 episodes? That's 6 hours, over 6 hours of...
Does anyone listen to us talking for 6 hours?
I doubt it. Well, you, because you have to edit it.
I do have to edit it. Yeah, it's quite depressing.
So you have. That's one person.
That's one person.
Okay. Yeah. Good. So welcome, everybody. Here we are. So we'll crack on.
Crack on. Start with a bit of news. First thing I want to talk about news, eBay bullshit.
Oh.
I've had some eBay issues, honestly. So my amp that powers my NS10s crapped out last week. There was that familiar weird smell I haven't smelt for a few years of burning capacitors or whatever it was. A slight wisp of smoke and then the NS10s go off. I really liked that amp and I wanted to try and find another one the same. I couldn't. NS10s are very picky. They can sound absolutely awful if you underpower them or use the wrong amp. And, you know, I've used maybe 3 or 4 different amps over the years. Couldn't find the same one, but I did a bit of research and I found another amp which people said was a nice sounding amp for NS10s, the right amount of power. Someone had already put rack ears on it and everything. It was being sold by a company rather than a person. So I thought, I'm in a good space here. I'll get that amp. So I got it on eBay. Obviously, you have to wait a little while. It's not like ordering online these days where things turn up the next day. It took a few days to turn up, which kind of slowed my work rate down a bit. And then it turns up and I plug it all in and I get it all racked up and I wire it all up and I turn it on and it don't work.
Wankers.
I'm so annoyed. I was so annoyed. I'm like, oh my
eBay.
God.
You know, I was on eBay the other night. It's so nice. It's so noughties, isn't it? It's just like...
Yeah, it's old school now, yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah. It's weird in that when it
like
first
MySpace.
came up...
It's like,
Well, when it first appeared, it was like everybody selling their old shit, which was quite interesting.
Yeah.
If you were into something which was no longer in the shops, someone was probably selling it.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's people getting rid of old shit or selling new shit that they wouldn't let you sell in the shop.
I got a funny story about eBay, actually. I can remember I sold something and somebody, I can't remember whether I might not have posted, something happened anyway, and they sent me a really weird email. Like they said, you shouldn't be doing this and you can't sell eBay, you know, stuff on eBay. And I hadn't posted it yet, so I wiped it all around my bottom before I posted it. I think it was a DJ controller or something like that. Wiped it all around my arse and then went, there you go. Keep your funny email.
Dan, only you
could
fit something like that up your ass.
I didn't say up my ass. Anyway, don't buy anything from eBay. On eBay from me.
Don't buy anything of Dan ever. Or shake his hand. Terrified now. He's sat on the chair. Jesus. Damn. But anyway, yeah, that did bug me. However,
I'm not surprised.
I bit the bullet. I thought, right, this isn't working. I can't go through that again. I've just ordered a new one, which has cost 4 or 5 times the money. But, you know, hopefully it'll last a lot longer.
Did you send the broken one back?
It's sat there in front of us. It's going back in the post tomorrow.
That
Annoyingly,
you've got to pay for.
well, this is really funny. So they didn't charge me postage. They said free postage.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. Well, obviously, I forgot to pay to send it back.
Yeah. Free postage for this brick.
Yeah. So even though, I'll get my money back, but I don't think I'll see the postage. And it weighs such a lot. That's going to cost a fortune to send that.
Yeah.
Anyway, whatever. Moving on. Second bit of news is also eBay related, but on a happier note.
I wonder if I've got a story about this bit.
I hope so. So I also had a successful purchase on eBay just before Christmas. I have been after one of these for a while. Well, Golly they make the Golly EQ, they make the dynamic EQ, they make all kinds of interesting mastering tools, and they do this thing called a cross compressor. And I've sort of always been fascinated by them ever since I first heard of it. So I sort of really wanted one. It was on my wish list, but they're just too much money. I just couldn't afford one. They're like £3,000. And then I saw one as new on eBay, 1,700 quid. So I bought it and it sat there and it's now part of my mastering chain. And it's as good as I hoped it would be. It's really quite a cool bit of kit.
Is it?
So... do you want to know what cross compression is?
Not really, but I suppose you're going to tell us anyway.
Well, that would be a bit pointless being here if I didn't. So it's 2 band. So there's high and low. And each band, the high and the low, has, so there's EQ. You can select a frequency, cut or boost it. It's also dynamic EQ, so you can set the compressor on that band to do compression individually for the low, individually for the high. So once you've got that dialed in, that's that. But there's also a dial on each band which says cross compress. And when you crank that up, it sends the compression from that band over to the other one. And then you can do it vice versa as well. So the effect is it's basically expanding the other end. So let's say this is your low, and your low is compressing like this. Every time there's a doof, doof, it's compressing like that. If you send the cross compressor on, as you do that, the top end will do that. So you end up getting this effect. And then you can set one at the top end as well. So maybe when the snare hits, that's dipping. But you can set that so it pushes the bottom. Now you might be thinking, what the hell does that do? What that does is, let's say someone sends me a master and it's a little bit lifeless. Let's say the drums are a little bit too buried in the mix, or they're not dynamic enough, there's not enough transients in there. It just lifts them out. It lifts them out of the mix. And it's just, there's nothing else that can do that. A transient designer can't do that. It's a unique effect. And I love it.
I was right.
You wish you never knew.
Yeah. Yeah. No, interesting. Cross compression.
Yeah. It's fairly unique, but I do love it. I love the fact that it could just be an EQ if I want, or a dynamic EQ if I want, or I can do cross compression if I want. And the quality of it, it's just built like a tank. Some of the dials are switched, some of them are detented. It's just beautiful.
It's got those fancy meters on it as well.
It's got quite fancy meters. Although they're not the easiest to see, but I don't know if that's the lighting or the meters.
Well, it's...
But I did find out you have to mount it, like you have to look straight at it. You can't read what's around the edge of the controls if it's mounted the other way. But luckily, I could do that. So yeah.
Thank goodness for that.
Thank goodness for that. So there you go. Send me your masters, and if your dulls a drum, I'll sort them out.
There you go. Send him your masters, people. Send him your masters. Okay.
So that's news. So that must mean it's time for plug-in news.
Which means another of the famous Studio Life Sean J. Vincent top fives. And in number 5...
We don't know what we're talking about. You're just jumping way ahead here.
You're not the first person to accuse me of that.
You haven't got to that bit yet, Dan. You've jumped way ahead. You finished before we've begun. Wind it all back in. Pull them back up. Let's get back to the foreplay.
Yeah, okay. So
we're looking today at vocal compressors.
Brilliant. Vocal compressors.
Vocal compressors.
In 5.
In at number 5.
In at number 5.
We are going for the LA3A. Now I'm talking...
Because it's one better.
Well, it's a piece of hardware, really. I've got the Comp 3A, the Golden Age sort of clones. There are various plug-in versions of it. I particularly like the one, I think it's Purified Audio do one, which is very good.
Yeah, the
Panda
thing.
Yeah. I think it's the VU Comp.
We did that like
a long
was
time
one of the
ago.
early ones.
Was one of the early ones.
Yeah.
But I really like that. The LA3A is really interesting. It's kind of like a cross between the 76 and the LA2A. It's a nice sound. Some vocals, it really works.
Excellent stuff. In 4.
In at number 4, one we've reviewed very recently. It's the TubeTech CL1B. We looked at the soft tube one, but UAD also make one. Very smooth, transparent compressor, opto, similar to an LA2A, but more transparent, I would say.
Excellent stuff. Do go back and look at the reviews for these, because obviously they're amazing, insightful, and incredibly useful.
Sometimes.
In 3.
In at number 3 is another one I've got as a piece of hardware, which is the DBX 560A, or you could use the 160A. And there are various people that have modelled this too. I would definitely go and look at who's my favourite one? I've forgotten. But anyway, Google it. There's loads of plugins that do a 160. But the DBX 160, it's a VCA compressor. I use it on bass nearly all the time, but it's really, really good on vocals. The over easy setting, dial it in. You can see very clearly how much compression you're getting. And again, it's got a sound, which is, it works on some people's voices, not others, but it's good.
In 2.
In Tune 2, it's the 1176. How can it not be? It's just, it's part of the law of being a recording engineer is that you must use an 1176 at some point. Now, there's loads of really good ones. I like the Purple Audio one by Plug-in Alliance, but we also found the SA76 by... Who made the SA? I can't remember who made it. Fairly recently, but it was good. It was really good and it was cheap, so check it out.
SA76.
Yep.
Google. And Bully's special prize in one.
In a one, how can it not be? It's the LA28. Teletronic's famous opto compressor. Just a beautiful bit of kit. You kind of have to treat it differently to every other compressor. If you see 7 dBs coming off your vocal, don't panic. That's about right. It sounds awesome. There are several good ones. The UAD is very good, but I really like the Opto Red by Tone Empire, surprisingly. That one is very good. So LA2A is the winner for vocal compressor.
There you go, people. Top 5 vocal compressors. You heard it here first.
That was plug-in news, which must mean it is time now for Retro Talk.
Retro Talk. This is my favourite bit now.
Dan's favourite.
It used to be my least favourite bit.
So we changed it up. Retro Talk used to be where we talked about gear that we used to use in the past and we missed. And we've changed it up, and now we talk about retro tunes that mean something to us.
Do you have to explain that, do you think, every episode?
No, I don't think so. No. Maybe this could be the last time.
Maybe that could be the last time.
Yeah.
I should have said that to you after the...
Yeah, I know. I'm boring Dan now. It's been a long day.
It's been a long 20 years, mate. So again, we encourage people to request tunes that we discuss in these retro tunes, and we just talk a little bit about famous tunes, how they were recorded, any interesting facts, bits of, sometimes I make stuff up just to make it a bit more interesting, though I haven't on this occasion. But we have had this.
Is that your whole life?
Yeah. My whole life, yeah. This was a request from our Instagram channel, Studio Life 101. Somebody wanted to talk us about a tune called Ain't Nobody by Rufus and Shaka Khan. I've never heard of it, but apparently it was quite big in 1983.
What's a tune? I was 10.
Pardon?
I was 10.
Were you? Yeah, I wasn't born.
Shut up.
So yeah, won a Grammy for Best R&B performance as a duo for Rufus and Shaka Khan. I didn't realise Rufus was a group.
I don't think I certainly didn't know that then.
Anyway, it was a track written by David Hawk Walensky, and it was he had a synth loop going, and the synth loop is the bit that you hear in the beginning.
Yep.
Which, incidentally, interesting pop fact, is in 9/8. Can you count me a bar of 9/8, Sean? You're just going to count to 9.
No, I can't. No, that's really hard.
9/8 apparently, and originally it was programmed on a Linn drum, and Roger Linn was supposed to be part of Rufus when he was working on developing the Linn drum. No, he was going to be their touring guitarist.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but he declined because they didn't pay him pay enough.
No, fair dues.
Oddly enough, Sean and I met years after this, in the 90s, but we met at a place where there was a drum clinic.
It was nearer that year than this one.
It was nearer this year.
That's scary.
Yeah. But we met where J.R. Robinson was performing a drum clinic and using this track. And J.R. Robinson, he was the drummer on the Thriller album and a lot of the big tracks at this time. The Human Drum Machine, he was renowned actually for not having to use a click track. He was that regimented. Anyway, also famous for we were talking about this in the pub, weren't we? The intro drum fill on... Rock with me. Yeah, Rock with you, Rock with me, whatever. So J.R. Robinson then played over the Linn drum loop that sort of built it. Anyway, and so they recorded this song. They got Shaka and Rufus in to do it. And Warner apparently wanted to hold... It was one of 4 tracks recorded to go on a live album.
Oh, okay.
And they wanted to hold back Ain't Nobody to put out one of the other 4 tracks. And the writer, Hawk Walensky, said, if you don't release this as the lead single, Quincy and Michael want it for Thriller. So,
I can't even get my head around that.
Ain't No Body by Shaka Khan and Rufus was nearly on Thriller. And Warner decided then...
I can hear that. That would have worked.
It would. Well,
yeah, of course it would.
It was obviously all going on. I mean, what a time to be alive. All that going on.
Imagine having that song and thinking, don't know.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Who was the other dude the disco writer wrote Disco Inferno? I shouldn't have started this conversation.
But you did.
I did, yeah. Roger. I fucking can't get his name out. Anyway, but just what a time to be alive. All these.
I've got a laptop.
You have got a laptop here. Bass intro 9/8, 1984 Grammy. Ain't Nobody, Shaka Khan, Rufus. Lindrum, J.R. Robinson. It's about all you need to know.
Tune, mate.
Comments in the comments section. Wow. Sean, J. Vincent.
That's a tough one to follow. Yeah. So I'm picking a track which had quite a big effect on me at the time. Not necessarily a good effect, 100%, but an effect. I was a bit of a U2 fan in their Rattle and Hum stage. It was, teenager in a band. I was guitarist in a band. I think we thought we might be the next U2 kind of thing. And U2 had gone away for about 5 years to, decide whether they were going to keep going as a band. And if they were, they wanted to come back with a new sound. But obviously there's no internet in those days. No one knew what the hell was going on, what was going to happen. I just suddenly heard on the radio, this is U2's new single. And then The Fly suddenly came blasted out my car speakers. And I'm like, I pulled over and sat there in sort of shock because it sounded nothing like the U2 that left. It was a completely new sound.
Was this the big glasses and all the...
Yeah, it was like industrial sounding drums and like mad sounding guitar, vocal was all distorted. I was like, oh my God. And I immediately bought the 12-inch on vinyl, which I still have. And it became a massive part of my sort of musical education. It was 91. I'd been working in studios for about a year when this came out. And I sort of deconstructed it, and I just desperately wanted to know how they'd done it, because they'd been famous for like big rock drums, delayed guitar and all that. And this wasn't that. It was completely different. And if you listen to it, the drums by Larry Mullen Jr., they're very small. It's a very small snare. The drum kit sounds quite tiny, and it was physically a small kit, small like piccolo kind of snare, and the whole thing is run through a filter. In fact, I've got a preset called Acton Baby Drums in my in one of my filter plugins, because I wanted to get that drum sound. So it's a very small drum sound, but just turned up loud. And then Edge's guitar sounds mental. Apparently it was called The Fly because they said they thought the guitar sounded like a fly buzzing around inside your head. Yeah. And then you've got this weird vocal where it's lots of statements, and apparently they're called single line aphorisms, and they're expressions of truth or principle. And they are, every single line is a something, it's an expression of something, and it all sort of joins up into a chorus, which is totally different. Bono sings it in like this weird falsetto voice. Recorded at Hansa Studios in Berlin. Hansa Ton meaning sound in German. Very famous studio. They went there because Bowie recorded some of his best stuff there, and I think they wanted to try and get some of that vibe that was in the walls. And also, this was 1991, so the Berlin Wall had recently come down. All of a sudden, it was like a place that was rapidly changing very, very quickly. And we've been to Berlin together, and I still go to Berlin relatively regularly. It's a very vibey place, incredibly arty place, and at that point it was all starting to happen because it was changing so quickly. Produced by Daniel Lanois, recorded by Robbie Adams and Flood. Flood being the engineer that also co-mixed it with Daniel Lanois, Steve Lillywhite as well. Flood got his name because when he was a tape op, he kept making tea. Wouldn't stop making tea, so they called him Flood. He ended up doing a lot of awesome mix work in the years
sounds
after
like
this.
It, yeah.
It was the industrial sounds of it, I think, that really freaked me out. It'd been very brave, and I think they admitted in interviews that they'd listened to a lot of like 9 Inch Nails and industrial stuff.
Well, a lot of that stuff was going on, wasn't it, in Berlin at the time?
I think they finished off the recording of it. They didn't do the whole thing in Berlin. I think they did early sessions there. Then they took it back to Ireland, and it was like finished there and mixed there. Came out October 91, and I think it was quite a surprise for everyone, but also it rejuvenated their career. They'd become a little bit boring rock band. You know, stadium rock had become a bit.
Yeah.
And it totally rejuvenated them. They did the Zoo TV tour and again picked up a whole
That
new
was
audience.
meant, like, I remember all that happening and it just being this whole.
Well, that was the
show.
negative side of this I was going to talk about.
Was it?
Well, I went to see Zoo TV in 1992 or whatever it was at Wembley Stadium, you know, and I would have been, I don't know, 19 or something. And I just stood and watched it and thought, damn, that's incredible.
Yeah.
I don't think I've got it in me to do anything that good.
Yeah.
And that was quite a thought to have as a 19-year-old.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I
I thought, you know, my aspirations as an artist sort of stopped. Not immediately, but they were close to.
I can't do anything as good as this. So if you can't do it, why try?
I kind of thought, yeah, you know, that's awesome. That's like
They're quite because they've recently done this thing at the Vegas Dome, haven't they?
I've seen, yeah.
Yeah, they were the first. They're sort of pioneers in the live production sense as well.
They're one of those bands. I mean, they wind up as many people as they give enjoyment to. They're very Marmite, aren't they? They wind people right up. Bono is a very, you know, divisive character.
He's famous for that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Every time I click my fingers,
Another child
a child dies.
Stop
Stop clicking your fingers. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see how he's. I mean, I sort of stopped on. I think How to Dismantle an Atomic Bomb was their last great album. And after that, I've kind of lost interest.
I've never been a fan of them album-wise, but there's songs like "Bullet in a Blue Sky" for me.
Bullet in the Blue Sky,
is like it's an epic.
Well, I think
song.
that period, 87, from the Joshua Tree, and then I think I do think that Acton Baby and Zooropa were both epic albums. I think Pop that followed it was also good, but you could tell they'd rushed it. It was kind of it's tailed off after that.
Yeah,
and I've kind of. You know, I still keep an eye on him, but I haven't bought an album probably for 20 years.
How old do you reckon Bono is now?
How old is Bono now? He's got to be late 60s. It's got to be. Because, you know, when I went to see, oh no, maybe not, maybe mid 60s. I don't know. I would assume he's
Who's the dude they get involved with? Who's the bald guy that took over the music business? Whose name I've been trying to think of.
The bald guy that took over the music business.
Yeah.
It's a bit vague. I don't know. Kojak?
Well, he was in bed. Yeah, Kojak. We'll leave it at that. They were in bed with him anyway, weren't they?
I have no idea. Oh, you mean Steve Jobs?
No, I don't.
You don't mean Steve Jobs?
No.
All right, we just had to pause there for a minute and look it up. Jimmy Iovine.
Jimmy Iovine, yeah. So when did they get into bed with Jimmy Iovine?
I think he was involved around Rattle and Hum time.
Was he?
Yeah, I think he was involved early with U2.
Because I didn't realise he was involved with. He used to go out with Stevie Mac. Not Stevie Mac. Stevie Nicks from Fleetwood Mac, didn't he? And he was involved in rumours and all that shit.
Jimmy Iovine was working on studio sessions with John Lennon.
He's
been around for a long time, and then started Beats with Dre and made billions. Right.
Yeah.
Making
you don't
terrible
want to make
headphones.
sneakers. You want to make speakers.
It was so bad, those headphones.
What, the Beats by Dre?
Yeah.
You think?
Yeah, awful. I had a few pairs.
Did you?
Pretty awful. Anyway, whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's the end of.
That's
the end of that.
That's the end of that.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So that must mean, Dan.
It is time for.
This is time for Hot Topic.
Hot Topic.
It's Hot Topic. Today's Hot Topic. We're gonna go deep. How deep? Well, I don't know. I guess we'll just see how deep it goes.
So this week, episode 12, the hot topic is microphones. High end versus budget. Is there a difference? What do you think?
Yeah. Yes, there is. Thanks, goodbye.
Okay, so let's say you're in a studio and it's a budget studio, and you go and open the mic cupboard because you've got to record a band, and they've got a set of Samsung drum mics. They've got some no-name dynamic mics, and you've got to do your day with that.
Well, I've got, kind of know my feeling on this, because obviously we've worked at universities and stuff together. In fact, it wasn't one of my assignments, but a good friend of mine, Jer, one of his assignments was you've got to record a whole band with one SM57, multi-track a band with one SM57.
I think that's good, because an SM57 is one of the few mics in the world you could do that.
Exactly.
And it would sound awesome.
And I was, again, we've talked about microphones and performance.
Yeah.
If you're working with a rock band and you've got a vocalist who sings best with a 58 in their hand in the control room, it's your job as a producer / engineer to deal with the fact that they're singing through a 58 in the control room.
Of course, yeah.
If that's where they perform their best.
Yeah.
However, I have owned some Samson drum mics. And they are particularly horrible.
Yeah.
And I think drums are actually probably in my opinion, one of the exceptions. Now, you could get away, obviously, with drums. You get used to close micing.
Yes.
Don't you? So I always feel you can get away with, if you've got decent overheads, you can get away with quite a lot.
Yeah, I think you're right.
If you've got a nice pair of matched overheads, you can just get away with quite a lot on the close mic.
Yeah, I think that shows up experience quite often. If you watch a very newbie guy mixing a drum recording, they will start on the kick, gate it, compress it, EQ it, kick in, kick out, snare bottom, hat, tom. The last thing they'll do is push up the overheads. They'll hard pad them left and right.
Yeah.
And that'll be that. Whereas actually, start with the overheads. Get them sounding like a drum kit. Get them sounding like you're stood in front of the drum kit. Then start on the rest. And
I completely agree.
You'll get a much better drum sound.
I've heard so many, this is moving away from actual mics and stuff, but so many interesting drum tips for recording, mic techniques for recording drums. One of them, I've never tried this. I don't know if you've heard of this. Somebody told me once they'd put a small diaphragm condenser on the floor with on top of their credit card.
Okay.
And then slide their credit card out.
What?
Yeah. And they'd use that as an additional room mic.
Oh, so it's floating.
So it's down,
hanging on a cable.
So it's on the floor. So it's on a stand, but it's literally a credit card.
Oh, so it's like a couple of mil off the ground.
Off the ground, like that. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Room mics. I'm a big fan of room mics.
I guess that's going to be a similar sound to a PZM. That's kind of how they work.
I guess so. Like I say, I can't comment because I've never tried it, but it's just all these different methods.
I went really experimental when I was recording live drums a lot, because you get bored and you just... The way I was taught to mic drums was, it was the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, everything was close mic'd, no one was really doing room mics. That's how I was taught. And then I bumped into some older engineers who were totally like, no, we're going to do this old school, we're going to mic the room, and then we'll put some close mics in where we need them. And that was a revelation, because it was like, don't stick the mic right next to the drum, back it off a bit, give it some space to breathe. And I was totally into, like, everything's going to be gated to death, everything's going to be completely separate. And he was like, no, we're getting a sound. And
the drum kit is the whole thing.
The mic needs to have room, So that's when I got into using things like 421s and giving them space between the tom and the, where the mic goes. Just moving mics a little bit further away made things a lot better. But also there was things like the kick. When I was taught how to mic up a bass drum, day one in the first studio I worked at, or might not be day one, but it was certainly week one, it was put the stand right inside the kick drum, probably take the front skin off, and put the mic like an inch away from where the beater hits on the other side of the skin. And that gives you incredible click. But no woomph. And I learnt years later, if I just put it just inside the hole,
that's it,
and there's a good foot, that is a lovely sound. And then mic the other side of the skin if you want to click.
Well, people they use a PZM, don't they, in the drum, and quite often.
I've never got on with that.
Have you not?
I know a lot of engineers.
What is it?
Swear
Beat 52? Is it 52 in
well,
the hole and a 91?
91 inside and a 52 in the hole. I still use a 52 all the time. I just love that mic. But if I want click, I will put a 58 on the side where the beater is.
Really?
Yeah.
You fucking weirdo.
Yeah. Just put it right there, pointing at where.
I tell you what, if I was playing drums and you came and tried to do that to me, I'll tell you where I'd stick that 58.
I don't really ask. It's just my job to get on with it.
But no, I've certainly never mic'd up a kick drum from that side. I tell you, Instagram's quite interesting for seeing how people mic their drums up.
Yeah.
You know, you see these weird.
Well, everyone must be learning from different people and getting different, completely different, education coming through. I remember I don't know if I nicked it or I came up with it myself. I must have nicked it off someone. Rolling up a rug.
Yeah, I know.
Put the rug roll into the kick drum.
You're a massive fan of this,
and then
you?
stick the mic at the other end of the roll. So the mic is at the end of a rolled up bit of carpet, which is 6 foot away from the kick drum. Honestly, awesome sound. And the other one I found was take an old pair of these. Happened to have them lying around. DT 150s. It was DT 100s at the time. Get a pair of those, clamp it, kadung, on the snare drum, top and bottom. Wire that up with a mic.
No way.
Yeah, top and bottom snare.
I like that.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I've never got on with bottom snares. Actually, we were listening to that mix of yours earlier, weren't we? That bottom snare. It sounded great.
Well, that was a weird one because I normally just want the rattle off the bottom snare, but in this particular case, there wasn't enough oomph, sort of like 125 on the top. So I found it in the bottom, and it sounded really nice.
I mean, the problem really when it comes to mega cheap mics, is the pickup pattern, the polar pattern. You know, and you find, especially in the live scenario, if you use for a vocal mic, if you use a cheap 58 copy, then you just can't get level out of it.
No,
because the polar pattern's not.
Well, I bought a cheap drum set of mics recently, well, not that recently, a few years ago, just for band rehearsals, a band I was working with, and we needed a kick drum mic, snare drum mics and tom mics and some overheads. So there was this cheap set. It was only for using for in-ears in rehearsals, so I thought that would do. And apart from the overheads, I think all the others are the same.
Yeah,
I think it's the same capsule in different constructions.
Of course it is,
It's identical capsules. You plug them in and you're just like, that's the same.
Yeah, that's exactly the same.
And, you know, they're fine. You can EQ them and whatever and they'll sound all right. But no, if you take the time to learn the differences in mics, and this was something I didn't believe in when I was a young engineer, like, the Coles soap dish mic. It's a beautiful mic, and the studio I worked at, we had one which we used on vocals quite a bit, and I didn't understand it at the time because it's such a dark mic. There's so little top end on it. Yeah, that I was like, I was always cranking top end onto it, and I didn't understand why you would do that. And then I was aware we had other mics which had not a lot of bottom end, and I'd have to crank it on, and it was only years later really when I finally sussed it out that you make those decisions when you're recording for that specific reason. If you want a dark sound, don't EQ, get a mic that sounds dark. You know, and if
tools for the job.
Yeah, if you do that, the starting point before you come to mix is so much better. Yeah. You know, because you've got the character of the mic. It was designed to sound like that. You haven't had to EQ it to sound like that. And because if you're going to do that, you might as well just get a bunch of 57s.
Yeah. Well, as we've said, I don't think there's anything wrong with having a bunch of 57s. No. I use that for large diaphragm condensers. I've got a Sennheiser MK4.
Oh, okay.
You familiar with that? And that's got a gold capsule. Yeah, and it's pretty. I reckon it's pretty much a Neumann without a switchable polar pattern on it. You know,
it's interesting when large diaphragm condensers suddenly massively came down in price. There was a lot of Chinese copies and stuff knocking out 20 years ago, and I remember doing a lot of comparison reviews at the time between. I think I had a microphone, the Joe Meek one. And I was comparing that to it. They were so close.
Yeah, they were.
They were really close. And there's a lot of them around now, but the difference is a lot of them were built so cheaply they didn't last.
No.
And they're very hard to look after.
Oh man, it's in the sling basket.
Yeah, in the shock mount.
Shock mount. Yeah. I mean, my you sort of have to. Ask mine politely if it'll. please, will you just stay upright long enough for me to record this vocal? You know, it's it's a nightmare that.
But it's interesting as well. I remember doing vocal sessions with vocalists, and we generally set up like a 414, a U87. What was the Bayer one? It was a similar MC something or other. We set up maybe 3 or 4 vocal mics, and people, you know, they would sing and bit into each one, and we try and pick which one suited their voice, and it was interesting because I sort of, again, at that point, I was not convinced really that there would be much of a difference.
I worked with DJ Fresh for a while, and we were doing some sessions with Ella Air. Yeah. And we hired in a load of different preamps and mics. and one of them being Sony C800,
Yeah.
800, 8000, we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And we were working on a track called Gravity, and there's two parts to the vocal.
Yeah.
So we recorded the whole thing on two mics with a ribbon on the top.
Yep.
And a C800 on the bottom.
Nice.
And she sang the whole thing into both mics.
Yep.
Both, and then we used the ribbon mic for the sort of the lo-fi parts, and the C800 for the hi-fi parts.
It's interesting, isn't it? I remember doing a vocal session once on a 451, which you just wouldn't generally use on a vocal. It would be on a hi-hat, maybe overhead.
Yeah.
Maybe a violin or something. But I can't remember why I used it now, but I used it and it sounded awesome.
Sounded amazing, yeah.
Really good.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, experimentation is the key. Bear in mind that expensive microphones with good track records, there's a reason.
I mean, I would use our mics. We were using
these are nice,
if you look back at our old videos, you'll see the mics that we were using. I can't remember what they were.
We've gone through a few. We were very lazy at the beginning, just had a shotgun mic pointed down the room.
Yeah.
Then we started using a couple of Audio Technica broadcast mics. They're all right, but you've got to literally be on them like this.
But these
Austrian Audios, what are these? These are the OC18.
So that's a good example.
These are nice.
You could go back and listen to the difference with those Audio Technica broadcast mics, and then listen to the quality of these.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good
they're top of the range one. The one with the adjustable polar pattern. That one on vocals is just something
Here's
else.
one for you.
Yeah.
Peter Waterman
records
vocals on a U87 into a wall or into a you've got there with a figure of 8 polar pattern.
Purposely, what does he do?
On purpose,
phase invert thing.
Peter, can you comment?
Yeah, what are you doing?
Why'd you do that? But it swears by it. I mean, this guy, recorded Joss Stone, recorded big vocalists, all of these. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess.
Glad I brought that up.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, that must be some kind of. You can cancel out the noise.
It's something
with
to do with reflections, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it would cancel them out, I presume.
Maybe I should phone him.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. So I think you can go over the top with microphones.
You can.
But I think generally you need to, it's the first thing you learn as a sound engineer: shit in, shit out.
You can't polish a turd and all of that.
You can roll it in glitter.
That's true. We do spend a lot of time doing that.
Rolling shit in glitter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Anyway.
Well, tell us your experiences of cheap mics versus expensive mics and different mics. What have you found?
What have you found that works? What mics do you prefer and why?
Yeah, we'd like to know. Cool. That was another fun one for us. I hope you enjoyed it too. If you enjoyed it, click the old like and subscribe to the channel.
And don't forget to check out our Instagrams, Studio Life 101. We also have a Patreon, and all related links are just down there.
They certainly are.
So please go and have a click.
Nice one. And we will see you in the next episode, which is episode 13.
Oh.
Might have to give that one a miss.
Yeah.
See you later.
I'm not doing it on my own.
Yeah, you are.